that. Excellent, excellent. Well, thank you everyone for zooming in this evening for today's program presented by Kate Plumb through the East Hampton Library. What can we expect in 2022? If anyone has any questions, please type them in the chat, or when we get to the end of the presentation during the Q&A part, if you want to use the raise hand feature, or if you want to just unmute at the end of the presentation, that's perfectly fine, and we'll address your question. Without further ado, I'd like to turn over this evening's talk to Kate Plumb.
Everybody for coming to this. This is the third time I've given it, and perhaps you know, maybe this will be the charm. Seems to be that things are changing so quickly. I had to change some slides for this presentation because the first time I gave it was in January, and frankly, the year has started off more quickly than I anticipated. But we will review where we've been and where we're going, and if with your permission. I just wanted to, my goal here is to bring you confirmation through the observation of the movement of the planets that indeed we are living through a remarkable time which has no precedent, and that there's no going back. That's one of the things I feel very strongly about, that the planets are informing us about. And one of the ways I like to do this as an astrologer is looking at the planets and where they're positioned. Now, this is a completely false but accurate in one way sense of what as astrologers we are doing. And if you can see, this is in English and there's no glyphs here, so you can see the zodiacal signs in the backdrop: Aquarius, Pisces, Aries, Taurus, Gemini. And this part of the astrology never changes, because we, in our solar system orbiting around the sun, all the planets in our solar system, including Pluto, are orbiting around the backdrop of the zodiacal signs, these 12 signs. And in this this diagram, at this point, with all of the planets orbiting around the sun, you've got the moon orbiting around the Earth, you have Venus and Mercury inside of the orbit of the Earth, the Earth is there, and the other planets on the outside of the orbit of the Earth. But in this diagram, we might say that Mars is in Scorpio, because at this point from this diagram, Mars is passing in front of Scorpio. And in this diagram, you would say Saturn is in Libra. Well, Saturn now, in its orbit around the sun, has moved all the way over to Aquarius. And Mars, at its orbit around the sun, has moved all the way over to Aquarius. And so this is an older time, but it gives you the sense of what's happening here, what we're talking about. Here in this position, we have Neptune in front, between, right on the cusp of Aquarius and Pisces, and Neptune today has moved very closely, more strongly into Pisces. So as astrologers, what do we do when we want to look ahead? We have to we observe where the planets are in front of what part of the zodiacal belt, the ecliptic, the path that all the planets take around the sun, the backdrop, and we notice where they are, knowing that every moment in time is unique. And we observe, though, the relationship where one planet is in front of. Here's Pluto here in front of Capricorn, and we're going to talk about that one a lot because Pluto is still in Capricorn, although it's the very end of Capricorn now. So we look and see where the planets are in relation to the signs and in relation to each other, and what patterns they're making with each other. So we know that the planets orbit around the sun in circulars, or actually ellipses. It's not circular like this, but for astrologers, time is circular. And so we look back in the past and see what happened, and we get clues as to what might happen in the future. It's not always exactly the same, and that's the important point, that every moment in time is unique. But time for astrologers is circular because we are orbiting around the sun in semicircular paths. So when we look back a little bit to assess where we are, there are 4 very major planetary influences that we're still working through and under, and that was from 20 and 21. And the first one we'll talk about here is the Saturn and Pluto coming together. And of course, you don't see Pluto. This is a fictitious putting Pluto here because Pluto cannot be seen with the naked eye. Saturn is up here. Saturn can be seen. And you know, roughly this is their conjunction, which occurs approximately every 38 years. Now, in 2020, they met at in January, 222 Capricorn. My thing is above that, but yeah, they met at oops, backspace. Sorry, back here. Saturn and Pluto met in January 12th, I think it was. I can't see it in my thing, but at 22 Capricorn, and we know what 2020 brought. Right away, we had COVID and we had George Floyd's execution on May 25th. Those were 2 major events that have a precedence. They have reference points to back in time. Now, Saturn is a planet in our lives that contracts and creates structure. Saturn rules the teeth in the human body and the bones. So Saturn is a contracting principle. Pluto is a principle that terminates and creates something new in its place. There's a evolutionary imperative to Pluto that when it is strongly working in your chart or in a nation's chart, or you will actually see an imperative to actually do something. You're forced to do something. And the power will shift and things transform. So when Saturn and Pluto come together, there is a contraction in the structure of your life and something dies because Pluto brings a destruction, and then comes some kind of resurrection. These are glyphs from the times previously that, you know, with Saturn, this is the First World War, and then 9/11, and then the fascism. And I think that's another First World War event. But the last time these 2 planets, Saturn and Pluto, were together was in Capricorn, because they meet every 38 years, but not in Capricorn, was 1517 to 1518. That was during the Protestant Reformation, when Martin Luther put his 95 Theses on the cathedral in Wittenberg and was abhorrent with the abuses in the Catholic Church. And as we know, that started the Protestant Reformation. It started Henry VIII and his wanting to be his own church, and he denounced the Pope was no longer valid because he wanted to get married a couple of times. So and also the beginning of the slave trade occurred by the Portuguese in South America in 1517 to 1518. So Capricorn rules the structure of our lives, the institutions, the churches, the governments. So when Saturn and Pluto get together, we have this enormous transformation, this contraction and transforming of those institutions that we had come to rely on. Certainly the Catholic Church was no longer the same after that point. And unfortunately, the beginning of the slave trade, our relationship with the owning people began then too. A plague was also part of 1350 and 1918. And so plagues and Black Lives Matter and slavery and pandemics, and even in 1947, after the war, there were political, geopolitical, societal structures were completely altered. So in your life, it might be not, I mean, it's certainly overwhelming in your own life when this happens, when you have Saturn-Pluto conjunction that occurred in a place in your natal chart that was important for you. It's going to be more important. But certainly for you, if it's that degree where it occurred is happening close to your chart, and we all have Capricorn someplace. But certainly everybody's society felt this lockdown, Saturn, and contraction, lockdown, scarcity of goods, loss of jobs, restructuring of our income during this time period, starting in 2020, January. The second major event, a planetary event that we're still under, is Saturn and Jupiter. Now, we had talked about Saturn and Pluto coming together, but Saturn and Jupiter you can see, but this conjunction of Saturn and Jupiter occurred last year as well. And this is an old Kepler, he was an astrologer, astronomer. They were the, you know, we call them different names, but about the understanding of how significant the Saturn-Jupiter conjunction that occurred in December of 2020 is for us. And the one reason is when these two planets come together, they come together in a different element: fire, earth, air, or water. And in this diagram, every 20 years, they change the sign, but every 200 years, they change the element. So you can see in this triangle, the Saturn and Pluto conjunctions occur here at the end. It looks like it's the end of Sagittarius, and then they went up into another fire sign in Leo up here, and then they went over here into Aries. And every 20 years they changed, but they kept in these familiar, in this situation, it was the fire signs. So this is the conjunction, December 21st, 2020, which ended that. They were really brilliant in the sky for those, and Jupiter is the brighter star up there above that tree. So these conjunctions have been occurring in Earth signs since 1802. And this was the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, when we were, everybody, they were the manufacturing, and we were using the Earth's resources, we were accumulating stuff. The last time they occurred in Earth signs was May of 2000. That's when the tech bubble in the stock market burst, and that we won't see that happening again in Earth signs and for 800 years now. So for the next 200 years, and this is what's so important, that Jupiter and Saturn meeting in Aquarius, they're going to be in air signs. This is an air element, and air is different than Earth. Earth wants to accumulate resources, touching physically and manipulating the Earth, and air wants to figure out how to make a difference in people's lives. It's about relationship. The air signs, Gemini, Libra, Aquarius, they're about people. They're about relationships. They're social relationships. How am I treating each other? It's about ideas with Gemini. Air is very fast moving and open to constantly changing circumstances. And we see that this year, as I said briefly before, it really got off to a much bigger start than that I anticipated. So Jupiter explores and expands the belief systems that Aquarius represents, which is equality. Aquarius is the water carrier, and he's actually, he is carrying water, but it's energy that he's pulling out. You can call it, it might be water, but it's what is he bringing out? What are the ideas that are coming from this Aquarian? So the only zodiacal sign that has a symbol of a human being. So Aquarius, when we're all moving into, we've been talking about this for decades, the age of Aquarius. So we're all moving into the understanding of what it is to be human. And so this Jupiter and Saturn conjunction at 0 degrees of Aquarius will represent the beginning of what the man, the figure of humanity is all about. And Saturn, the belief system of Aquarius represents equality, technology, inclusiveness, androgyny, humanitarian ideals and relationships. And we see this happening in our lives, what we read about. That we're struggling to get to a sense where things are more equal, society. So Saturn will eventually build the structures that the belief system requires in order to manifest. But there's a lot of chaos when we're changing from 200 years of Earth signs. And of course, we've only been here for 50 years or whatever, individually. But so we are experiencing a completely different societal contract, because it's now the gold is not in the gold physically in the ground, but it's in our ideas. And we had an inkling at the beginning of this in 1988 and 89, when the Jupiter and Saturn conjunctions were in Libra. And that was really the beginning of the technology era. So that's kind of what air is all about. Don't see what you're getting, you have it on this computer, and we're all in air. We're no place. We're not physically any place. We're all together in some substance where we all meet. It's a completely different way of relating to one another. The last time Jupiter and Saturn were in air signs was during the Middle Ages, and I love this. It's a painting about and the monks, and the monastery system was very, very strong then. And this is, to me, this is almost like an 800-year-old understanding of computers. They were all connected by these vines, and you know, they were taking all the old Greek and Latin texts and manuscripts, and they were converting them, and they had all the secret world going on in the monastery system. And during also the High Middle Ages, we had a huge balance of power was starting to shift, that monarchs used various means to centralize power that they hadn't done before. They expanded the royal domain and set up systems of royal justice that undermined the feudal and the church courts. They began to have a sense that what you were saying was not dictated by a higher power, that you had a right to be in a system, in a court system, where you had somebody listening to you. So this an understanding that we are in this time period for the next couple of, well, we're in Gemini, we're going to be in it for 200 years, but we're in this, and it in the previous time was the transition from the medieval to the Renaissance, and so ideas were very important. So this conjunction occurred then in March 5th in 1226, and then now in December 21st, what just passed. So this contract that Jupiter and Saturn make, it dictates how we regulate ourselves in society and which beliefs we build upon. Is it possible that we can get a world happiness GDP like they have in Bhutan? The air signs are concerned with relationships, communications, social justice, technology, equality. So the wealth is in your ideas. So if we can think about what's happening with all of the internet and the Facebook and Instagram and the meta universe, wearing a virtual reality on your head and you're supposed to be someplace else. The circulation of ideas, podcasts. We're not getting information anymore from reading newspapers. We're getting it from listening, from the air, and viruses. It's part of the air. It's part of the air modality. It's how they were spread. We thought it was being spread by physical, but it turns out it didn't get spread that way. It got spread through the air. And that was an interesting understanding of this transition from the earth element, where the Jupiter and Saturn conjunctions have been, to the air. So we can expect new educational communication systems will be established, and humanitarian ideals, equality and justice, will be on the forefront of people's mind. How are we treating one another? What are the belief systems that we're living by? So the third influence, which is ongoing, and we're still participating in it, is this Uranus and Taurus, which started in March of 2019 and goes to July of 2025. Uranus is the lightning bolt. It's the inventor. It's the sudden things happen. It, the creator. It's the spontaneous. You have a lightning, or you have an inspiration, or you have a spark of an idea. That's Uranus. There's a sudden shock to Uranus. And in Taurus is the earth. That is the most stable, that's what we own. We walk on the earth, and Taurus rules the earth. It rules our value system, and it rules our finances, because it's ruled by Venus. So we can expect important changes in our physical environment. We've seen that with the weather problems. They shift in weather patterns and the severity of the weather disturbances. So this Uranus and Taurus in these years are going to cause many intense and sometimes catastrophic physical phenomena, shocks to the global financial system, and finding cures for involving sexually transmitted diseases. Suddenly you have a cure for something. And this came up last week, I think, because someone shared that they've found through stem cell research that they can actually cure AIDS. That was in the news just lately. So it promotes eco-friendly technology. We have all the drawdown and the climate change and all these crises. It's all the technology, because Uranus rules inventions around the earth. So we're experiencing that, and explore new ways of counter pollution. I mean, they're using bamboo. They're making kelp farms because kelp will actually absorb the carbon from the atmosphere, and it also helps the oceans. It salinifies the oceans again. So this is a kind of picture we used years ago about the shock to the financial system, that the girl in the bull in Wall Street, and she's standing up to the bull, the corporate interests. That's part of this Uranus and Taurus. There'll be upsets in the financial system. And also values. Values are very important to Taurus. What you want, what you desire, what you is, and this will go through this transformation in these years. Some years stronger than others, but it's up to all of us to actually define what we hold to be valuable. Social principles, goals, or standards held or accepted by an individual, class, or society. So we're going to see this definite changing of what we hold to be valuable, what we're going to work for, what we want, what we desire as a society, and also individually. And also to a certain extent, what is right? What ethics can we go on? Morals. It's all part of the Taurus modality. Here in 1933, the last time Uranus was in Taurus, FDR signed the Banking Act, because at that point, they, after the Depression, and everybody lost all their money in the banks. There was no, security. We take that for granted now, but the last time Uranus was in Taurus, 84 years ago, FDR signed a bill that made we had the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, that your deposits in the bank were guaranteed because they had such terrible experiences. So we see now this upsetting in the financial systems, we're talking about a digital currency, all of this cryptocurrency, and this is all in the air. You can't figure this out where it is. It's a virtual, and they're even talking about a global digital currency, so that everybody would work on that's the kind of possibilities in this day and age that's dawning on us. It won't be euros, and it won't be dollars or rubles or anything. There will be one digital, not physically. It will be in some great computer system in the sky, I guess. It's all kind of mind-boggling to me. But anyway, we see evidence that this is what's going on, how we're actually even now with Venmo and paying people, which is a wonderful convenience, PayPal and Venmo. It's all getting very abstract, which is air, intellectual, abstract. You don't see it. It happens, but it's all in the air. So this is also, last time Uranus was in Taurus was also, we had the Dust Bowl, so these sudden changes in the weather. February that year we had minus 14 degrees in New York City. And that was June 34 to 42 was the last time Uranus was in Taurus. And we're also seeing now this different kind of relationship to nature. Uranus and Taurus is going to bring this, instead of having the degrading of the soil and the conquering of nature. We got to come, we have to go in and make sure we're overwhelming it. We're trying to build a different relationship to nature, which would be these wonderful regenerative agriculture, with maybe many of you have heard about it, but it's farming practices and grazing that actually reverse climate change by rebuilding the soil, organic matter in the soil. The organic eating organically, growing organically yourself, and not putting any chemicals or pesticides in the soil will actually, the organic matter in the soil will actually draw down. We can help our climate change by each of us taking responsibility for some little patch of our Mother Earth that we are turning into organic, and not, fertilizer, none of the chemicals on the earth, because it's destroying the earth and it's not helping reverse climate change. So drawdown has been a wonderful eye-opening for me about the importance of it's not only not putting carbon up there, but it's also the ability of the agriculture, the practices that we have down here to pull it into the earth. And this is Kiss the Ground, is a movie that recommend everybody to, if you want to know more about that. This is also about the Uranus and Taurus. We have this understanding of what the fungi, the fantastic fungi, what's happening to the mushrooms and how the trees are communicating with one another. We never knew that before. And the underground and what's happening with the fungus and what they're doing with mushrooms these days. Oh my goodness. This is going to be one of the major agricultural turnarounds, that and seaweed, growing seaweed, having seaweed farms, which were they're the innovations that are coming forward. Carbon Crew project, which was started by our local group in Southampton, Dorothy Riley and Sheila Pfeiffer, and they're helping each individual have your own little plan for how you're going to draw down some carbon and prevent and help realign the climate change initiative. So the fourth influence, which is ongoing, is the Saturn Uranus conflict, and this is the one of the difficult pairings of planets, because the Saturn and Uranus are operating on two different mindsets, and they came to a conjunction that were most recently in 1988, and then they had reached a 90-degree, and that's how we do it in astrology. We look at these patterns that the planets make with one another in 1999, and then we had the opposition. They were opposite one another, and then we are at this closing square now. So what began in 1988, and this was really the technology that began in 1988, and also the strong conservative Federalist Society was born in '88. This is when they, there was decided that they were going to get all these different more conservative judges on the Supreme Court through the Federalist Society, and so there's a big conservative movement that began in the end of the '80s. So we are definitely at that closing square of this Saturn-Uranus cycle, and there'll be a new one where they're going to start a new era of what Saturn represents and Uranus represents. And what do they represent? So Uranus is the individual on one hand, it's the inventions on another, but it's the individual, and Saturn is the structure of society. So we are in a large, in a major manner, we are really, each of us individually, and the COVID, the virus really helped us reorient ourselves away. So what's my role in society? How does society serve me? And where do I fit in? Now, this is the Tunisian fruit seller, and I won't go into this now, but you remember that he was the one who immoled himself, and because he couldn't stand the pressure from the authorities, he was just trying to sell his fruit in Tunisia, and this started the whole, Egyptian rebellion, and then the Take Back Wall Street, that Wall Street movement, all those years. But this was Saturn and Uranus manifesting. So, and we can see at different times, Saturn is the structure of society, and Uranus wants to break something up, wants to put some progressive part of it. But every single major resistance movement, and here I've listed them here: the French resistance against the Vichy government, the conjunction, the Confederacy was the square against the Union. The Bolshevik Revolution was the opposition of these two planets. The French Revolution with the Committee for Public Safety formed with the square. And the opposition occurred on the day that Obama was elected in 2008, and the stock market collapsed. So these Saturn Uranus is this battle of the giants. And you can use it, kind of think of it as in terms of, I have the Matador and the bull here. And there are two opposing forces confronting each other. Saturn wants to keep things the way they are, and Uranus wants to shake things up. Well, come on, we got to do something different. So there's a battle, or a waging of, a tension built up here. So between the established structures of the past and the unpredictable impulses of the new, between the order and change, old and young, past and future, status quo and novelty, the forces of conservative resistance and the forces of restless rebellion. That's from astrologer Richard Tarnas. But we can see this. We've seen this all these lately for the January 6th event. But so what happens is sometimes the bull wins, and then sometimes the Matador wins, and then sometimes the bull wins. So what happens, and that's in our society, that's what's happening now. The people from the establishment, the Saturn people, oh no, we want this the way it is, the way it's always been, is the way we're going to have it. And the Uranians are saying, no, we've got to do something different. So there becomes this, the assertion on the Uranians' part for the need for rebellion against established structures. And you can talk about it in terms of unregulated financial activity too, or what happened on January 6th. But something in the system itself is outmoded and rigid, has gotten too stale and needs Uranus. So this disruption, that Uranus wants to bring creates a resistance on the part of those that want to keep things the way they are. So until there is a crisis, and that's what these two planets evidence. So this is an old piece of, the Saturn with the Earth, and Uranus was the sky god. And we can see this, how we're wrangling over the infrastructure bill that the Senate passed it in August, but the progressive in the House finally gave away enough to pass it November 6th, that that was not progressive enough for the progressives. They had to wait for months before they decided they would sign on with it, because half a loaf was better than none. And we also see this in the court rulings that we had the last couple of months, the Rittenhouse versus Marbury rulings. And I know you know all about that, so I don't have to go that, but one time the individual one and the other time the law one. So that's the kind of thing. So Uranus and Saturn had their third exact. We had it all through 2020. The third time was December 24th, but they're going to get so close together in October, particularly September, October. They're going to be at the same degree. And so if you have that 18 degrees of Aquarius strong, and you're going to be in this this chaos. And this is a picture of this chaos. What should I do? Should I stay with what I have, or go into something new and make something novel in my life? And there's this, and it's a balance that has to occur, because you need one and the other. So this is what's new in 2022. Finally, we got to that place that we can kind of look ahead, although there's no looking ahead in astrology. You're always, it's no January 1st didn't shut the door and have, something else occur. But we are in the Chinese New Year, we're in the year of the tiger. So we can expect more travel, because a tiger likes to roam. So, and there's a movement towards forming clans or tribes accelerating. And maybe like-minded individuals coming together. You have a tribe, you have a people that have the same beliefs you are. And those kind of groups were forming. I would certainly see the trends for 2022 as sudden marriages, desires, or divorces. Perhaps there'll be a Black woman on the Supreme Court. Wouldn't that be wonderful? So there's a volatility, because these two planets are in this tension. And short fuses lead to rash actions, and revolutionary concepts criticized and or rejected by the establishment. So this is winter. This was winter in, some December. As I say, this, I did this first talk in January, but it's significant. This is the Venus retrograde cycle, when Venus changes from an evening star to a morning star. She disappeared. She went into November 16th. She entered Capricorn, staying there until March 6th, 2 days ago. This is a long, wherever your Capricorn is your house, you've had Venus there for all of those months, November 16th. And what happened was, because it was an evening star, Venus, that was beautifully bright in the evening sky, and it goes below the horizon, marries the sun, and then comes as a morning star. And Venus rules our values. It rules our relationship. And it met Pluto 3 times during that time. So Pluto has this, this evolutionary imperative that when what I desire, you want very deeply, you have to have it. And the evolutionary imperative means you no longer can wait. You demand something from a relationship that maybe you've never demanded before. Or it's also your values, what you want, and you're willing to ask for it. It's also about money. Maybe you change banks, because Venus rules our values, our desires, our finances, what we hold dear. It could also have meant, and it's in the past tense, I have to say now, that you wanted something and never got in your life, but that it came back for you. A lot of times with Venus is retrograde, past loves come back in our lives. But there has been definitely a reset, and a power shift in relationship has occurred if you have Venus strongly, Capricorn strongly in the chart, or strongly ruled by Venus, and we all have it someplace. So these are just opportunities for you to, hey, this is not going well. I have to do something about it. That kind of, and we've just passed out of it, because Venus went into Aquarius, finally left Capricorn. And this is what happens when planets go retrograde. And you can see that there's a pattern here planets going to one direction. And then from our point of view, it's not stopping and starting. It's just because Venus is Venus's relationship to the sun. Sun is here, Venus is we're out here, and it's making a loop. It's changing its orientation to the sun. It's from an evening star, it's going to become a morning star. But you can see it goes over the three same area of your chart, your life, 3 times. So that's Venus retrogrades are really wonderful, and all of the planets. We have, Mercury retrograde 3 or 4 times a year. We're going to have Mars retrograde in the fall. These planets retrograding allow us to take a step back and go internally and operate more from our internal antenna rather than from the outside. We've had these conjunctions. We had February 10th. Venus and Mars are traveling very close together this entire time, February, March, and March 7th, the other day, they both were at 0 to 0 Aquarius. And this is a very interesting, because the 0 Aquarius is where Jupiter and Saturn met. And so Aquarius is the androgynous sign. It's humanitarian sign. It's the friends. It's these whole male and female is Venus and Mars. So you want to maybe be friends with people rather than being passionate. Maybe the Pluto Venus has left you sick of passion, or maybe it's done the reverse. There's no telling. It depends on your own individual chart. But certainly in terms of society, as Nick Dagan best said, it's a new normal in terms of our social consensus, what we agree how we will what we can agree on about how we treat one another. And there will be a jolt, and maybe there'll be more LGBT acceptance, especially there'll be something about March 20th about around the spring equinox, because Venus and Mars square Uranus, and there's that Uranus again that's suddenly upset. Maybe you suddenly fall in love. That's a possibility too, or suddenly fall out of love. So outdated values will be reviewed. Now, the wonderful thing that's happened lately is Jupiter re-entered Pisces on December 30th and until May 11th. And Jupiter went into Pisces last in 2021. And for that time period between May and July, when we came out of lockdown, there was a release. Suddenly Jupiter went into Pisces. Jupiter loves to be in Pisces. It gets out of the Aquarius, which is a Saturnine sign. It's a restrictive sign. Capricorn, Aquarius, they are contracting signs. They're ruled by Saturn, the structure of our lives. Jupiter comes into Pisces, gets out of Aquarius, and that time, and then we had that first experience of the release from the lockdown. And then when Jupiter went back into Aquarius in the fall, the lockdown entered again. But as of December 30th, that whole Jupiter is going to be in Pisces now until May 11th. So this is the return of the potential of seeing abundance and gratitude and emerging, the truth. Just like the dolphins running out of the water. Oh, I'm free. So it's a fabulous time to explore your imagination this spring, through art, music, poetry, dancing, and the relaxation of some of the lockdown. We can see it every place, mask mandates, all of this is just kind of falling by the wayside now. But it's important to meditate on your future, because this Jupiter in Pisces is the dreamer. It's the visionary. It's what do you want to manifest for yourself. So in spring, which is just about around the corner, we're going to see we have these two very opposite trends, and these will be in effect all year, because we're going to have a conjunction of Mars and Saturn, and we're going to have a conjunction of Jupiter and Neptune. Now, this woman carrying this brick across the road in high heels, or kind of semi-high heels, struggling, is Mars is your energy, and Saturn is this oppressiveness. I can't lift this thing one. And that is what those two planets coming together, they're the bad guys of the zodiac. They're the heavies of the zodiac, shall we say. And they met last 2020 in April 1st. And they're going to meet again on April 5th of this year at 22 Aquarius. So they're still in Aquarius, they're still in a Saturnine sign. And then this is a picture of what the sky, the southeastern sky would look like about March 27th. And you're going to have Saturn and Mars together, and you're going to have Venus here. Now, Venus could soften things. Venus presence with Saturn and Mars, because those are the two malefics, can soften just being there, it's not that the planets are dictating this to us. It's just that they're there and we have to connect to what's there already. You know, astrology got into this cause and effect because when the scientific revolution happened hundreds of years ago, but it doesn't really operate that way. It's not causing, the planets are not causing what's happening on Earth. It's a hologram, shall we say, what's happening, or a synchronicity, as Jung would say. So Venus is present with the conjunction of these two malefics, which is it can be very difficult. If you're carrying a boulder, you're still carrying a boulder. With Venus placement there, it can, she's the peacemaker. There's a potential here for peace to happen. Mars is a war, Saturn is drudgery, but there's a potential here for something positive to come, because Venus is going to leave the Saturn-Mars conjunction and go into the Jupiter-Neptune conjunction. This is another picture I put out about Mars and Saturn. And Mars obviously is the foray guy, and Saturn is defending himself by jumping up in the air. So this is a kind of what's happening now, that Mars goes forward, they want to, make the paré, and Saturn, no, I'm defending myself. And this is another thing about Saturn and Mars, what the trouble to discipline ourselves from getting off the phones and the computers, and because Jupiter and Neptune calls us to have some visceral experience in our bodies with our outer world, with our co-creations. These are other images of Mars, Saturn, not that pleasant. But we also have this Jupiter-Neptune conjunction in Pisces, which is, you couldn't get more opposite. So, and Venus is going to be there on April 12th. So Venus is moving from the Mars-Saturn, which is a hard, taking that boulder and trying to move it across the street, to Jupiter and Neptune when the dolphins are, jumping out of the water. So I think the last time these two met in Pisces, now they meet periodically every 12 years, because Jupiter has a 12-year orbit around the sun. Neptune is much longer. But they met last time in the sign Pisces in 1856. There's a lot going on in 1856. It was right before the Civil War. It was the Bleedy Kansas, if you know anything about history. It was that day, March 17th, was the first St. Patrick's Day parade in New York. But it's also interesting, particularly what we're going through now, is that month, and they were negotiating the Treaty of Paris between the Crimean War, ending the Crimean War, between Russia and the Ottoman Empire over the Black Sea. The Black Sea was, and even in my growing up times, it was always pounded into my head that Russia wants a water port. They need an outport. And in those days, 1856, there was too much, there was fortifications all over the Black Sea. So they made this Treaty of Paris. Russia's influence was greatly diminished. And this Treaty of Paris was signed, where the Black Sea was neutral territory and nobody could put fortifications on it, which is just an interesting aside. I don't know if it has anything to do with anything, but it's really interesting that we're embroiled in this situation with Russia right now, when they were in a similar situation in 1856. So envisioning your life, Jupiter's expansion, Neptune is your dream. It's how you want to escape from reality. Now you can do this in crazy ways, or you can do it in real sensitivity to the spiritual, to uplifting, to going up and understanding that we're spiritual beings. So, but it's a choice that we make. This is a picture of this Jupiter-Neptune. It's either delusionary, this escapism, or it's a really spiritual experience that we can have the opportunity to have. Now, the interesting piece about this time period is that all the planets are moving forward. February 4th to May 10th. There's very much personal movement. It's unusual for all the planets to be moving forward this long a period of time. So you're going to get results from our actions right away. You can feel there's a speeding up of time. Things happen very quickly. And so it's important for all of us, to use the time. That's what astrology, you know, the planets are up there. Okay, I'm going to use the time now that things are going in the forward direction, because the rest of the year is not like that. So if you have any, you know, that you want a new initiative or something, it's time to do it. You know, that, I mean, if you dream about it in Pisces, what is it you want to create? What is it you want, how you envision the, you know, this period of your life to be, because we are in a new normal, let's face it. We're also in this eclipse season, they call it a season, the Taurus-Scorpio polarity. This is one of the reasons that the fixed signs are having such a hard time, or are still last year and this year, all of the fixed signs, Taurus, Scorpio, Aquarius, and Leo, is because the eclipses are running through. They're running through Taurus and Scorpio. So the first eclipses in your life, and Taurus and Scorpio are really about money and your values, waking up, you can clear a path for creating a new form. The most important events in your life happen if an eclipse is strongly affecting your birth horoscope. So this is eclipse season now, and eclipses they are so mysterious that they can come in ahead of time. But anyway, the first solar eclipse, new moon, is April 29th. The full moon would be May 16th, Taurus, Scorpio, our values, my money, his money, your money, our money. What do I want? What can I, you know, what entanglements can I have with other people's money? And the second eclipse season of 2022 is the new moon on October 25th at 2 degrees of Scorpio. And then there's a full moon at November 8th, which is full moon lunar eclipses. Things come to a head at a lunar eclipse. That's the full moon. Oh my goodness, I see what I didn't see before. New moon starts a new beginning. We've had it monthly, but it's only at these times when we have eclipses, when we have the exact lineup of the sun and the moon and the earth. And there's something entangling. This is a dragon's head and the dragon's tail. There's something from the cosmos, you want to say, the universe, something not in my general viewpoint, something in the periphery that wants to happen here. And this is where we let go and let God. May 10th is it Mercury is retrograde, and that would be May 10th. That's always a time to notice in Gemini, and May 10th to June 3rd. And there again is these backtracking. You start direction. Oh, I changed my mind. Somebody else changed my mind. Oh, I've got to rewrite this thing. Something has to be done, refigured out. So summer, this is an interesting time. It's not quite summer, but there's an interesting conjunction of Jupiter, the planet of going together, and at 3 degrees of Aries, Jupiter and Mars meet. This is a big initiating energy. So this is just a couple dates in the summer to watch. June 4th, Saturn goes retrograde at 25 Aquarius, and July 28th, Jupiter goes retrograde at 8 Aries. If you have those degrees strongly in your chart, you'll notice there'll be a kind of a standstill, and I'm going to have to make a slow backwards, you know, trek, not sure where it's going to go. September 10th to October 2nd, another Mercury retrograde, you know, because periodically goes. August 1st, has a very volatile Mars square Uranus, and this is a picture of what that would be. You know, the Mars is your energy and Uranus is your sudden. It can do good things, of course. You can invent something, but there's going to be a suddenly inventing something. But this Mars conjunct the anarchist, the one who takes action suddenly goes against something or has a new innovation. Uranus would be strong then. So this is another one of the times when they're 23rd of August, and they're going to meet Saturn. And here we go. That's going to be the troubling time. That's what most astrologers that I talked to taught about, that the fall time was going to be the more difficult time. August 21st, Mars goes retrograde, goes into Gemini for 6 months. And this is a big piece of what's going to happen in the fall. And it's an air sign, Gemini. You all have Gemini someplace. But this is a wonderful little piece of describing the Mars in Gemini. Mars is your energy, it's your focus, it's your drive. And Gemini is how you're expressing yourself, your words, your thoughts. So this is, you know, when you have Mars in Gemini, and so this is the time. speed and your hand-eye coordination and your words and what you're doing, this movement part, it was going to take this backslide. So we talk about sometimes, because Mercury was the trickster. If Gemini is ruled by Mercury, Mercury's the trickster. You know, he oftentimes Geminis, they kind of speak from both sides of their mouth. So sometimes we can say we have to be careful during this time of trickery, confusion, misdirection, disorientation, dividing and conquering. You might be, if you have it in your chart, you're very good at the martial arts and successful at sports. But we're going to have to be very hyper vigilant in this time period, not to get provoked by insults or curiosity, Patrick says, or contests, you know, but insults, words. This is a picture of Uranus is on the left and Saturn is on the right. Okay, and Uranus has an orb that's a counter. It works. It's on its sideways, and Saturn has its rings are straight. I just put this up there so you could actually see there's such a contrary physical appearance of these two planets. So fall brings this Mars retrograde. Here again, here's the around Taurus, Gemini, Cancer. This is Kepler again, and he did all this work on without any telescopes, or very minor ones, about this is what happens in the sky when Mars goes retrograde. It makes a loop because Mars is outside the Earth's orbit, and that's just a beautiful pattern. All the planets in the sky make these most beautiful patterns. So at the September 21st at the equinox, we have Mercury, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto all going backwards. So the larger social forces cannot make any tailwind. They only meet headwinds. And this is the tightening, the Saturn Uranus tightening at 18 Aquarius, September and October. So, you know, one of the definitions is incremental awakenings are only possible. So if you have Saturn, where you have Gemini in your chart, we all have it someplace, you'll get a long passage of the god of war, action, will, force, assertion, anger, aggression, all the way from Sunday, August 21st until Sunday, March 26, 2023. So there will be a midpoint in the Mars cycle, which is worth noting, which is December 9th, this coming up, because it's the halfway point and the pressure is off at that point. There is something that's been alleviated. So when Mars goes retrograde on October 30th, just in time for Halloween, because that's the Mars and Gemini time period, the whole span was the time period I just showed you. This is the time when it's actually retrograde. You know, that's this pattern that it's making, and then it gets the retrograde here, and then it's going to go back, and then it's going to go forward again. So Mars, I envisioned it here, the lion is roaming around, and when Mars in Gemini means there'll be less roaming around, or it's wise for you to take the cue and you know, take a longer time to decide before you take some kind of initiative. September 28th to October 6th, Mercury, Neptune, and Mars, miscommunication on many levels. Mercury and Mars and Neptune are going to be involved, and Neptune confuses things, and Mars is action, and I make a mistake. And so by October 23rd, Saturn goes direct and begins to fall out of the square with Uranus. And as Churchill once said, it's the beginning of the end. But of this stage, of these two planets coming together, October 29th, Jupiter moves back into Pisces for the last couple of months of the year, which is a beautiful, until Christmas time. We have that relief of Jupiter in an Aries is like, which we had since May, is a little bit of a, you know, daredevil, and you know, Aries is the first sign of the zodiac, and I better take some action. I'm on a mission. Missions are important. Goes back to Pisces. Oh no, let me just lay back and dream and make this magical world for myself. The November 8th midterms has Mars retrograde, lots of fighting, square the US Mars and Neptune, and a lunar eclipse and Mercury. Yeah, I'm not going to say much about that, but it's kind of complicated. And for the USA, Mars is square Neptune. You know, we have the Mars where we're putting our actions, square Neptune in the natal chart, and I'll show you that in a minute, in our 1776 July 4th chart. And that's going to be occurring again in the same, in that connection again. And this picture, which I found on the internet, is kind of what it is. Mars is, she's dreaming there. She doesn't quite know. The dog wants to go ahead, and she's just sitting there. She's not quite sure she wants to go ahead. And that's kind of like what the energy is going to be in the fall for the US, you know, and because Mars is Neptune is your ideals and Mars is your action. We have had a strongly messianic, meaning we have to go, we have a mission to save the world in our destiny so far. And whether that, and it also can be all kinds of things that are confusing and fake news and mental confusion. And because in the US, we are having a progress Mars retrograde, which means that, and we can see this evidence, we've decided that boots on the ground is not the way to win a war. And we are changing how we are asserting ourselves. And that's Mars retrograde in the USA chart. Now that's what we're going to see in the fall, personally, individually. So our military endeavors now are, you know, they take technology and do drone strikes or these currency sanctions, among other things. So I'm going to just point this out briefly. I know this scares some people when you see this is the natal chart of the United States, the July 4th, 1776 chart. And then this is what I want, one of the things I wanted to point out. This is a Pluto as positioned in this chart, 27 Capricorn 32. And Pluto on the spring equinox here is at 28 of Capricorn. So it's returning to its natal positions. And it's going to go retro, it's going to go forward, it's going to go back, it's going to hang out here all year long. We can also see, like I showed you before, the Venus position between Mars and Saturn. Here's Venus. Now Venus is going to move to Jupiter, and it's going to move, it moves fastest, it's going to move over to Jupiter and Neptune. And here we have Neptune in this in the sky. This is where the planets are in the sky now. Opposite are the United States' natal Neptune, and they're both square Mars and Gemini. So this is what's going to happen, and Mars is going to be retrograde in Gemini in the fall. And this is what one of the evidence of this, one of the characteristics of this energy is Mars is this messianic, having a mission, a altruistic mission. With Neptune, you can be healing the sick, but you can also be deluding yourself. This can be the news, you know, the fake news, because Gemini is a lot to do with our communications. So this is a repeat in the sky in the fall for the USA, which is something that's in their natal, it's in our natal chart, the Mars square Neptune. So that's what's kind of interesting about this time period. Here's the 0 degrees of Aries when the sun goes into Aries, which is the spring equinox. So enough of that. So Pluto, people do not have Pluto returns because Pluto takes about 250 years to go around the zodiac. Empires do. The Roman Empire did. England had 3. They have huge environmental problems, but they unearthed themselves from that. And Elizabeth's reign had, you know, a lot happened in Elizabeth's reign, and she became very powerful. So it's not always, you know, a source of total misery. But I put this slide up because this is Monday, September 29th, 2008, and on the New York Times, because Pluto entered Capricorn this time. It entered Capricorn, and that chart I showed you before, the actual picture, Pluto entered Capricorn here. It entered the second house of finances in the United States' chart. Finances. This is in your chart too. It's your money. So here's Pluto sitting in here in the second house, and Pluto has been in here since 2008. This is evidence of the complete rehaul in American finances and in our values, because the second house is also your values. So we can see it here in 2008, when Pluto entered that second house of money, we had the, you know, the collapse of the Lehman Brothers, and the stock market collapsed. We had the entire, that whole debacle. We also had Obama being elected. So, you know, yes, this is just the beginning of the Pluto return, and certainly it begins then. But in 2022, we're going to have exact passageway 3 times. We had one January 20th, just as we were just about when this Putin's war started, and we're going to have it July 11th and December 28th. So Pluto brings power shifts, and because Pluto represents a shadow, it's Pluto's, and in this United States chart, based on where it's positioned here, there's a lot of secret money. There's a lot of dark money. Money is used behind the scenes, and because we have our Cancer country, we have planets in the 8th house too, which is, you know, we're very tied to money, other people's money and businesses and entanglements with but it's Pluto here in the which we've never experienced before. Pluto's return is, as I say, the Roman Empire had a couple, and England did, but we have never had that before. So when plunder, this is an interesting quote, I thought. Frederick Bastiat, he was a French economist, 1801. When plunder becomes a way of life for a group of men living in society, they create them for themselves in the course of time, a legal system that authorizes it and a moral code that glorifies it. And we pretty much have that going on now. Now, it's interesting that Biden administration has really made addressing corporate corruption as a centerpiece. He declared in last June a fight against the corruption as a core security interest of the United States. That's the cyber warfare and all this. He says here that he said this: corruption threatens the United States' national security, economic equity, global anti-poverty and development efforts, and democracy itself, he wrote. By effectively preventing and countering corruption and demonstrating the advantages of transparent and accountable governance, we can secure a critical advantage the United States and its other democracies. So he's in early December 2021, Biden, he announced a comprehensive strategy for countering corruption, which is a great sign, you know, that, you know, of course, what it actually means in practice is going to be a little bit disturbing probably, but Biden is a Scorpio. He's got a lot of planets in the 4th house. He's doing stuff behind the scenes. But this plan that he announced in early December pulls together the Departments of State, Treasury, Commerce, along with the USA Agency of International Development to expose global financial shenanigans, hold corrupt actors to account, and protect journalists who dig into the stories of corruption. Well, that's a good ideals to work with, and hopefully, and we don't have to go through all of this. This is just the things that I brought out. You made a list of the issues that might come to the surface now about the dark money, about the big pharma controlling corporate media. You can't get a straight truth out of when there's money involved in something. We have the whole vaccine business. Why didn't we use ivermectin when it was cheap and they were developed by 2 Nobel Prizes? All of these answers, what really happened in Wuhan? You know, why is Pfizer covering up all this other stuff, these settlements they're making? So the big corporate food monopolies, plus the Citizens United ruling, you know, about all the political contributions, the unregulated money. And about Julian Assange, who 5 years ago, he put out the CIA was using malware, and now he's, you know, if he gets extradited back to the United States, he's going to get 175 years in prison for saying the truth. And the other thing that I just read about in the New York Times in the magazine section was Clarence Thomas's wife, and how she's was involved with January 6th and actually paid for some of that. And some of her key issues are before the court. I mean, all of these things, there's many other that I'm sure you can come up with too, but there's a lot of corporate shenanigans going on it's shadowing. There's there's one you read on, you're reading mainstream media, what's going on, but there's a whole nother vast network, and maybe some of you have delved into it, about what's going on that it's not getting reported for one reason or the other, because the financial interests are not allow it. But as some corporate will divest themselves, others will be developed. And certainly I've heard there's more capital allocation going in regenerative agriculture. I know I said this before, but this is a really big thing. You know, this changing our relationship with the soil, not competing with nature, but partnering with nature, and not disturbing the soil, but protecting it. And monoculture into diversity, keeping hedgerows up, not having these vast swaths of, the plains that were just dirt, just became dust bowls because they got rid of all the hedgerows. So anyway, this understanding, this holistic, we're in partnership with nature, and that's partly what's going on. And I think there are some big macro financial systems that are actually investing in these new systems, and that's what we're seeing. I'm almost coming to the end. You've been very patient. I know we started a little bit late. But this is a French astrologer, Barbault, and he puts all the energy of the planets together. And if you notice here, he can say that, he gives spot, this is the Saturn-Pluto conjunction we talked about that occurred there, Jupiter-Pluto, Jupiter-Saturn, Jupiter-Neptune, that's where we are now. We got these other ones to come, but there's a tension, there's a buildup in when all of these conjunctions come together, these new beginnings come together. You can have a conjunction, of course, with the little planets, the planets that are inside the orbits, they don't, you have them a lot in the year, but not these big planets, these outer planets that involve Saturn, Pluto, Neptune, Uranus. They don't happen every year. So this is, and this is what he said in terms of the contraction, crisis, and revolution, 20 to 24. And the solar paths, I'll give you that one too. And this is another way inverted to show the peaks of tension. And here we have 20 to 24. That's another huge, it's the peak of tension because of he puts all the planets together. He has a certain formula. He's a very brilliant mathematician. And this is where we are now. We're also in the middle of these solar eclipses. Remember the 2017, all of the stress of that, the weather patterns. There was a problem in the southwest. There was a problem up in the northwest, southeast, and we're in the middle of another one. We will be in 2024. It's never happened before. This is the path, when the sun and moon make those eclipses, a shadow falls on the earth, and the shadows falling on the earth and you can go through there, but that's a whole nother talk about where the shadows fall for eclipses, and that's the countries, the places on the planet that are the most stressed. So we are in this pattern now, for these next 17 really, when we are the United States. Well, and we can see we're cut in two. I mean, we've got Saturn, Uranus also. That's another cutting in two. We've been practically become ungovernable, but there's this. Something has to be turned. There's a tension that's built up. So in conclusion, I would really say that we are definitely being challenged in our both personally and societally in our worldview, and certainly with what's going on in your life, and certainly with your family, and with COVID and the Ukrainians, this sense of worry, fear, and guilt can overwhelm us. Absolutely overwhelm us. And you can certainly feel that is the way to be. But you can also flip that, just like we're flipping from Mars, Saturn to Jupiter, Neptune in this time period, this spring, from one of a belief in the human potential with a connection to the divine. You can also say, okay, the spiritual life is alive. There's something in Putin that's part of our understanding of making this decision. Are we going to be ruled by authoritarians, or are we going to be ruled by democracy, or wherever the people rule? And that's, ideally everybody has a say. So looking behind, I am filled with gratitude. Looking forward, I am filled with vision. Looking upwards, I am filled with strength. Looking within, I discover peace. So there's this connection with the human potential, with our own spiritual nature, and in some religions, and we are spiritual beings having an earthly experience. So, and I love Martin Luther King Jr.'s faith is taking the first step even when you don't see the whole staircase. And that's the concept of being able to see the potential without seeing it in front of you. That's this kind of crossroads we're in now. And it's only going to happen if each of us takes some appropriate action, because it's not like the planets are going to go down and do this to us. That they're there, and we have to hook up to them. That's there. The opportunity is there. So we can say that we might be in the birth canal, from the the fetus was in the mother's womb, and everything was taken care for, and it was all everything was protected, and everything that was fed, it was warm and cozy, and then we're in this birth canal now when we're getting something squeezed out of us as human beings. I'm taking a bigger picture here, but here I am. So, but there's something that maybe fear and guilt and worry and dread are getting squeezed out of us, so that we can see that, and the cervix opens and the light of the outside world, and the baby's going to emerge with a new potential, with an understanding of our spiritual nature, and that we all are one in a bigger sense, in a continuing real sense. But we have to envision it. We have to use our will forces to make it happen. So inwardly freeing yourself from any old mental patterns of negativity and fear, and they're old, and they're junk. You ought to get off the Carousel wheel. We're in a different age. I love this quote from Rudolf Steiner: "Freedom is the sense of being capable of actions motivated solely by love." It's a beautiful sense. So how do you do this? So consciously making a daily or sometimes hourly connection with spirit through prayer, meditation, yoga, going to church, walking in nature, healing the body-mind connection, artistic endeavors, through spiritual teachings, playing, making music, practicing humility and forgiveness. Forgiveness is probably the single most important thing any of us can do. Getting rid of the resentments, grievances that the ego wants to keep harping at us. And just give forgiveness, just let forgiveness wash over us. And washing over is because with this Jupiter and Neptune and Pisces is a water sign. You got to wash over, a lot and forget a lot. And at least in my life, in my human relationships, we just have to let that go, because what somebody will do to you, ego, and upset your ego, it's not really them. It's doing it. It's their personality, or what's in the body is doing it. It's really their essence is the same as yours. We're all made of the same stuff, and that's what we're trying to get to. So during 2020 to 24, the turn of the age, this is from Hanu Varuna, which is where I got those charts from the astrologer with the graphs. It is our individual duty to inhabit, honor, and exercise our deep soul instincts, wisdom, and spirit senses, to live in tune with the heart of creation, to remain actively relevant, and create vital, workable solutions for the honor and fulfillment of whole great spirit on earth. It's the way the Native Americans treated the earth. Can we get to that point so that we are in harmony with our environment and all around of us? So this is the last slide, and just has a visual for you to take in, or just envelop yourself in, and experience wholeheartedly this fantastically amazing transition period that we have all chosen to live through. And if we are here, we have a role to play. And any reminders, we all need reminders every day. So I'm hoping that this talk kind of give you some ideas or some suggestions on how to proceed for 2022. Thank you very much.